Two trains on the same line. One is out of control. One has hundreds of passengers. And they're on a collision course. This is the story of a Hinton train collision. On the early morning of February 8, 1986, Via Rail's number 4 train, the combined Supercontinental and Skeena, was traveling from Jasper, Alberta to the city of Edmonton. The train consisted of 2 baggage cars, 2 coaches, a dome car, 3 sleeper cars, 2 steam generator cars, and 3 vintage engines, which were FP7 6566, F9 6633, and FP9 6300, which was in the middle of the train but not in operation. So why was the train in such an awkward order like this? This was the result of combining 2 different trains into one for the long journey, with the 2 lead units and 5 cars coming from Vancouver, and the second section with the inoperative unit and 5 cars coming from Prince Rupert. The sleeper car and the steam generator on the back of the train were on their way to Edmonton for maintenance work. 94 passengers, 14 stewards, and a crew of 7 were on board the train. Unfortunately, this long, relaxing transcontinental ride was about to come to a crashing end. Further up the line, Canadian National's train 413 is on its way to Jasper, about to make its stop at Edston for a crew change. The crew hasn't had much sleep, but stand on the platform waiting for the train. Today, 413 is huge. It consists of 3 engines, GP38-2W5586, and 2 SD40s, 5062 and 5104. They are pulling a high-speed snow spreader, 35 hoppers of grain, 7 flatbeds with large pipes, 45 hoppers with sulfur, 20 loaded tankers with all kinds of hazardous goodies, 6 more grain hoppers, and finally a caboose, making it a total of 6,124 feet long. That's just short of 2,000 meters. On this leg, engineer John Hudson and brakeman Mark Edwards will be in the lead unit, with the conductor Wayne Smith, known as Smitty, riding in the caboose. The crew board the train while it's still slowly crawling through Edston, which, although illegal and against CN regulations, will help save time and fuel, considering how long it would take to stop and start such a mammoth train. The 2 trains are face to face on the same track. However, there is a way for them to pass safely. After all, freight trains sharing tracks with passenger trains is not uncommon. At Hargwin, just outside of Dalehurst, there's a switch where CN 413 will stop at a signal on the track adjacent to the main line. The Via Rail will pass it on the main line, and then the CN can rejoin back onto the main line once the Via Rail is clear. However, like the Chase Maryland collision to come in the next year, this wasn't the case. CN 413 doesn't slow down. It instead rockets through the junction, picking up speed at 59 miles an hour, and forces its way back onto the main line with no derail to stop them, heading straight for the Via Rail. Conductor Smitty tries to get through to the crew in the lead engine, warning them about the signals he's passing, wondering what were they. But what's going on inside the cab is about to be one of the greatest mysteries of Canadian railroad history. Via Rail number 4 is departing Hinton, which will be the last time it'll ever make a scheduled stop. As the train is making its way to Dalehurst, World War II veteran Kenneth Cuddle is sitting in the dome car, and he sees a horrifying sight. CN 413 is right in front of Via Rail 4, on the same track. And then, it happens. The 2 trains smash head-on into each other like 2 charging rams at a combined speed of nearly 125 miles an hour, around the same speed Regional 94 was going when it smacked into the 3 Conrails at Chase. Car after car bash into each other, and one hopper is even launched into the air and crushes a coach like a Japanese sumo wrestler. Finally, everything stops. The dome car, where Kenneth Cuddle was sitting in, was just inches away from being crushed by the pile of twisted steel and metal. The locomotives and some tanker cars from the CN are buried and are beginning to burn. When the caboose of the CN train slams to a stop, still upright along with some of the freight cars that did not derail, Smitty spots a huge ball of fire growling ahead of him and calls his crew and dispatch reporting the crash, and then calls emergency services. At the same time, the conductor of the Via Rail can hear the CN conductor and tells his side of the situation from the passenger train. Smitty then tries to contact his crew, however they never respond. So he heads to the front of the train to investigate, and when two officers stop and tell him the small summary of what has happened, the full reality sinks into Smitty. He will never see his two crewmen ever again. Finally, 45 minutes later, rescuers finally arrive. What they see is complete bedlam. Two large trains have smashed into each other, and some of the tanker cars and diesel fuel from the engines are burning. Hundreds of people are injured and walking around like zombies after such a horrific crash. 23 people are dead, 71 are injured. Then there's the question, what caused this to happen, and why? It's very unclear why the CN train failed to stop, but there's a lot of plausible thoughts. Engineer Jack Hudson was an alcoholic and a heavy smoker. He was also suffering from both pancreatitis and type 2 diabetes, putting him at risk for a heart attack, stroke, or even a diabetic reaction while in the cab. So it was concluded that he either had a heart attack or stroke or had a diabetic attack leading up to the collision. To add to that, brakeman Mark Edwards and conductor Smitty had a lack of sleep, and it's possible Edwards may have dozed off on duty. However, there's the dead man switch, which is a little pedal that the engineer must keep depressed during operation. If it's let go, a warning goes off after 10 seconds, and if nothing happens, the train automatically stops. However, this was most likely disabled by having a heavy object, like a worn-out brake shoe, put on top of the pedal to cancel out the alarm, because crews found the pedal rather annoying. It's unclear if this has happened, however, because the lead engine was totally destroyed in the collision. Reset safety control, which works a lot like positive train control and other train stop controls, was available, which is when an engineer has 10 seconds to push a reset button or move any control of the train, or it stops. This could have prevented the disaster since the second unit had it, but not the lead engine, due to it not having a comfort cab. Wayne Smith, the sole survivor of the CN train, eventually, nervously, testified about the events of the crash months later. It was noted that the crew were not in good communication with each other between the cab and caboose, even with working radios. Smith said he tried to contact the crew in the lead unit prior to Dalehurst, but other crews listening into the area heard no such calls. As they passed the signals leading into the junction, he did call, but got no answer. He could have pulled a brake cord in the caboose to stop the train thinking it was out of control, but he never did. His reason? He said he felt the train was still in control, when in reality, it wasn't. Maybe he just didn't want to get fired for pulling the cord, realizing that his crew were actually in good health. Because after all, that is possible. In the end, the crew of the CN were blamed for the crash. But Canadian National themselves came under heavy fire too, because they knew Hudson was at risk of a heart attack or stroke, but they didn't lay him off. The engines and the majority of cars of both trains were either totally destroyed or damaged beyond repair.
However, 6300 was rebuilt with a new cab from KCS 4062 and continues to operate even to this day as of 2012.
It's been over 32 years since this crash, and despite these changes, collisions still occur, like the Chase Maryland collision 1 year later in January, or the Chatsworth collision in 2008 when a Metrolink disregarded signals and head-on collided with a UP freight.
Or even the February 4th, 2018 CSX and Amtrak collision that happened not too long ago.
Some engineers still say it's hard to find some sleep or even have enough time to take a nice dump. You can't totally thwart disaster, but you can learn lessons and reduce the severity of those crashes and make them less frequent, so you don't have a repeat of history.